Hello everyone, it's Matt from Akuma Mods, back with a review on the Wiiboox Light 130. I know I needed to get this review done a long time ago, but I'll be honest, I've just been constantly printing with it, so taking it out of service to do a review was kind of not possible until now. So the reason for that is the screen finally went on it after hours and hours and hours of printing. Yeah, it finally died. So now we get to do our review for it. So to start off, I originally purchased this printer at the time it was about $598 on Amazon. And I just checked the current pricing, which I have up right here. And Amazon is actually selling these for $2.99 right now, which is an amazing deal for what you get. And I'll get into the reason why this printer specifically, out of all the printers that I have and have tested over the short amount of time, that I've been doing this, is the best printer. So without further ado, let's get into the reasons why that is. So first off, the design is kind of funky compared to most of the resin printers that I had. So to start off with, you know, at the point in time when I got this, I had an Anycubic Photon, Anycubic Photon S, Tronxy, Ultrabot, an Elegoo Mars, and a Hyea SQ1. So they all had different type of styles. They were usually pop top, or they had like a lid that popped up. This one is kind of a pop-up lid, but it's kind of interesting, some of the things that it has on it. So first off, the pop-up top, the hinges on it actually stay pretty well. So, I mean, you can go to a certain amount and it'll stay up there pretty well. Whereas, like, the Photon, it's either all or nothing, and because it's got a heavy hood. So that's what made that a lot nicer, is that it made it better. Plus, it doesn't come crashing down on you as hard as the metal lid does on an Anycubic Photon. So, so a couple things just to touch on why I have this as my go-to printer for literally everything. If I want complete and utter accuracy, there's only two printers in my fleet that will give me that right off the bat without tuning anything. They'll print 100% and be right on the money with accuracy. And the reason why this one's a little bit higher than the other one that prints high accuracy, which is the Nova 3D Elfin, is because the way that this is set up. So first off, you can see this is kind of a strange setup. They have a build plate that's similar to what the Formlabs uses. So it looks almost identical to it. Now, I've never seen a Formlabs in person or anything, but from just looking at photos, it looks very similar. So one of the nice things about this is the issue I have with current build plates on pretty much all resin printers right now is the build plate style. Most of them have them where the build plate is super thin and resin goes up and over it, and you have to end up dripping it off. Now, this one, you still have to drip it off a little bit, but the fact is the build plate is kind of hidden by this box area, which makes it really nice because only the resin sits on that build plate. Now, I haven't dismantled this or anything like that and checked to see exactly what's underneath here, but I know that if I happen to overfill the vat, which is impossible to do, I can't fill that over the build plate ever. But let's say we even happen to somehow do that. The fact is that resin will pour inside here and it'll drip right out the other side. So regardless of if there is a build plate that's beveled or anything that this is just hiding, it still gets off all the resin. So when I go to tip this, I usually tip it like this and I'll just leave it like there. And then I'll kind of raise this down and let that sit right on there and it'll just drip. So I just kind of have an automatic dripper on there. So that's really nice right off the bat. As you guys can see, I've gouged this plate to terrible extent. This was back when I first started using a razor blade, and I didn't understand that, you know, gouging the plate is really, really bad. But it doesn't really matter because most of the stuff that comes off of this build plate has supports on it anyway. So, you know, worrying about having that transfer onto the print, it has never been an issue for me. So, the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is the vat. The vat has two screws that screw down. But not only that, the vat design is very interesting. So you have this small lip here, and then you have a higher lip. Now, again, it's pretty hard to overfill this, but again, it can happen if you're not paying attention. But for the most part, these are kind of markers to let you know how much is in the build plate. I believe this is 200, and then 500 is usually your maximum that you can fit in here. I don't suggest having 500 in there because that's going to get it pretty close, but you can definitely fit pretty much 500 milligrams, 500 grams, right? Milliliters, 500 grams, sorry. Had to think there for a second. 500 grams of resin. You can definitely fit that in there and be okay because it has a higher walled area and it kind of dips down a little bit. So this spacing that it has, the weird spacing, kind of helps that out, dispense it a little bit better. The other thing is the LCD screen is very interesting. It's a bigger LCD screen than most of the resin printers that were on the market at the time. And in fact, it's still bigger than most of the printers out there if you're using or comparing it to a standard screen. This is closer to a monochrome screen. This is actually, it's either a 5.8 or a 6.0 screen. I forget which one it was, but it's a pretty big screen. The downfall of that is screens are very expensive unless you go through China, and obviously you have to wait. But if you go through like Amazon or something, I think the current price was $70. In fact, let's go ahead and check that out really quick, just make sure. So yeah, it is a 6-inch screen. It's unavailable right now, so it looks like they're out of stock. But last time I checked, it was $70 through Amazon, and you can get them a lot cheaper through AliExpress. So, but what's really cool about that is it's not just like I'm gonna replace the screen and I have to replace this nice, fancy like textured tape area. No, this entire piece that it sits on that levels up is actually the entire screen area. So it is very proprietary. I'm not saying you can't replace the screen with a 6-inch screen and put it inside there, but it's just easier for you to 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts, take that all out, disconnect the cable, and replace it. So this screen is definitely different than any of the other screens that are standard screens. The coating on it is even different, whereas most of the screens they end in SX04. Those are your common screens like the Elegoo Mars, the Saturn, or I'm sorry, the Mars, the Photon, the LDR, the Quiditech, you know, all those standard 5.5-inch screens are usually the LS055R1SX04. That's what those screens are. So if you're looking to replace those screens, that's what you're going to be looking at. So, so that's kind of interesting that this is a little bit bigger. With that being said, you also get a bigger build plate. The sizing on this is actually 130 by 70 by 180. So it's also got a higher Z height than most of the printers on the market even today. I think the normal max is usually 150, 160. So, I mean, you still get a higher build volume at 180 on this printer over any other printer. So that makes it really, really good. Also, the other thing that this thing boasts about is that you can actually print very, very high resolution on it in terms of like the printing accuracy. So you can go down to 0.1 on this if you really wanted to. I've never personally went past 0.5, but it can go 0.5, 0.05, 0.03, and 0.01 if you really, really wanted to. It does do 6 to 9 layers per second. And what's really, really nice is that this has Wi-Fi on it as well. So you can also print from your computer and start a print and be on your merry way. So if you're looking for something that has remote control over your printer, this is a good printer to have. The other cool thing that it has is this has a modified version as a slicer from Prusa. So it has their branded Wiiboox slicer, but it's basically the Prusa slicer. It is a little bit behind the current Prusa build, but that's usually how it is. It does work very, very well, and their auto support system that they have on that is it is amazing. I've showed it off before. You basically take your fingers and you just run it right through, and it takes all the supports right off. You don't need any tools or anything like that, unless you're getting into really, really fine areas that obviously your meaty fingers can't get into. But that right there was what was my big seller on this, and why I made this my go-to printer. Was the software that it has is a modified version of Prusa Slicer, and they modified it to automatically work for you in the best of ways. So that right there, like I said, was my big seller. But the other thing was the build plate. The build plate was very, very interesting. I liked it right from the get-go. The other thing that's about this build plate is, obviously you guys can see that there's no way to really level this. There's no leveling on that or that. Well, there is. It's 4-point corners, which is the most unique leveling system I have ever used. Now, I do have another printer, which is another Wiiboox, that utilizes this 4-point system. But what's really interesting is that you can get the best level and the fastest level by doing this system with this type of level. It's not like the 4 points on the Creality LDR, or like an EPAX, or any of those type that have 4 screws on each side. And it's far superior to a ball joint system. So it's just all around a very, very nice setup. So I know a lot of people asked me when I got this, it was $600, which made it, $200 and some odd over most of the resin printers in that time era. But obviously it's come down quite a lot. But still, it is probably one of the best buys that I can ever have. It's not super quiet because this metal does tend to resonate the sound a little bit, but it does have some really nice insides. It's got an LED matrix, which again, that was unheard of at the time for printers in its range that were like this size. Usually those were $1,000 printers that had the LED matrix. Then obviously, 6 months down the road, LED matrix was kind of like a standard thing. And Anycubic started with that with the Photon S, and Elegoo shortly behind that, and so on and so forth. But they have perfected the way that this printing is set up. So one of the big things that I say is it's not really a maker's resin printer. It's more of an industrial or dental style. So a lot of people have heard me talk about the differences between that, and they don't really grasp the concept. When I mean that it's more or less for dental or industrial use, is that it's made to work. It's made to work constantly, all the time, and be high accuracy. And that's one thing that slips a lot of people when they're talking about resin printing, is accuracy. While your Elegoo Mars, your Anycubic Photon, your Creality LDR, they all print great. They print just as good as you need them to. But when it comes to dimensional accuracy, they kind of fall short unless you fine-tune things. This thing will print dimensional accuracy through and through every single print. So when I have a print and I know that it's off, I'm going to go ahead and test it on here, and if it prints fine, I know it's not going to print fine on any other printer because obviously the dimensional accuracies are going to play a big role. And that kind of plays all into how it's set up. What type of board it has, what type of LED it has, what type of screen it has. And again, this goes above and beyond most of those printers where it doesn't utilize the typical stuff that you see in, you know, the Photon or the Creality LDR or the Elegoo Mars. They do have different type of stuff. I mean, even all the way down to the USB drive. They included a SanDisk USB drive, which at that time, nobody ever did. They just included these really, really cheap USB drives. They looked nice, but they gave out after 6 months. This is the original one, and I've had this unit for almost a year. December will mark a year. So I printed with this thing nonstop, consistently, for almost a year before the screen died. So I'd have to say I got my money's worth out of it. Again, even though I did pay $600 for it at the time, it was really still worth it. I absolutely love it. I had no problems doing anything print-wise, accuracy, whatever it may be, off of this printer. The last thing I want to talk about is that when you go to slice a file on here, this technically has an onboard slicer, so you can go ahead and load up an STL file or even an OBJ file, and it'll slice it right on this printer. So it's got some extra added features that, yeah, some people might not care for that. They just want to print and they want a cheap printer. That's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and do that. But if you want a printer that you know will absolutely work 100% all the time, this is definitely a printer for you. I highly suggest these printers, even now. Even with all the new technology that's coming out with all the 4K screens and the mono screens, you know, if you're looking for a printer that just prints and you need to do, you know, kind of, what do they call that? Like, God, I'm losing my train of thought here. Prototyping, Jesus. So prototyping stuff. This printer is absolutely something you want to be looking for because this is going to print very, very high accuracy and it's going to get the job done no matter what. In all complete honesty, I've had one failure on this printer. And again, I couldn't even think about even a round number of how many prints I've done off of this printer, but I can assure you it's been printing nonstop for almost a year. So just think about that. And when it did fail, it was absolutely user error. I had the wrong profile set up. It was clear resin, which is kind of iffy to tune regardless, especially if you're using automatic setups, which their slicer has basically like a handful of automatic setups. And you can use those and it'll print, no problem. But obviously, with clear resin, it kind of is a little bit harder to get the right accuracy on it. And I had it too underexposed and basically it killed the print. So take that as you want. But yeah, only one failed print off of this entire printer. That is the least of all of my other printers I've ever had. And, you know, no matter what I throw in this thing, it'll print it. Doesn't matter. So as long as I got the right profile set up for it, it'll print perfectly fine. And again, it'll print the most accurate out of any of my other printers. So if you guys are looking for a really, really nice printer and, you know, want it to work, I highly suggest the Wiiboox Light 130. And that's pretty much all I got to say about that. Again, this is my best printer and probably will continue to be my best printer even after I change the FET film, which it's definitely seen some better days, and the LCD screen, which has finally died with almost a year after printing. So, yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. If you do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and leave them below, and I'll try and hit back at you as soon as I can. Until next time, guys, happy printing.